Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to my library tour for 2022. I'm looking through my books and making a visual record of everything I have in 2022, but also every once in a while doing a Library of the Lost, where I show you pictures that I've scanned of covers that I have had that aren't on my shelves anymore, because they're still in my heart. They're still in my memory, a lot of them, even when I don't want them to be. We're just going to go through a few of those for the rest of this week, a few more lost books that I don't have an ebook of them, don't know if they exist in ebook. Like this first one, for instance, I don't know that it exists as an ebook. And it ties in with a BookTube event that's coming up in May. The Bookish Bryons are once again creating mayhem with horror mayhem. That is their May event where we're reading horror fiction. And as with New World's November and February Fantasy Stories, they're breaking it up. I'm one of the hosts. We're breaking it up according to categories, and one of the categories is Gothic horror. I went on a little stem winder about that the other day, about how Gothic horror has never done it for me just in general, as a type of reading, and Gothic horror especially has never done it for me because I grew up in a Boston Irish Catholic family, so dark, rancorous moods that seem to exist as independent living beings and go on for centuries is just a day that ends in Y for me. It's not anything to be frightened about. And it seems if you take that out of Gothic horror, you largely take out a lot of it, that plus real estate. It's mostly about houses. This is a book from the old Plume imprint from 30 or 40 years ago. This is by Lewis Gannett, and it's called The Living One. And it bills itself as a Gothic thriller. A whole bunch of stuff is going on here. It's an epistolary novel. Those are very tricky to do correctly. Those are very tricky to do well. Bram Stoker makes it look easy in Dracula, but it's not easy. Richardson makes it look easy in Clarissa, but it's not easy to do. And this author largely doesn't do it. There's all sorts of, heavy portent and old draperies and moldy fruit and what all the stuff of Gothic fiction is just pulled out for this. And I've only read it the one time. I got it as a trade paperback back when it came out, and I would be willing to give it another try. But I remember just thinking, boy, this kind of thing just isn't for me. It just feels like a club that I am not invited to. Whereas this next one, it's for me in many, many, many ways. This is Lord Byron's Doctor by Paul West. Oh, don't want to block the beam, do I? This is a novel about Dr. Polidori, who was with Byron during that famous meeting of the minds that produced a whole bunch of supernatural signpost novels, most especially Frankenstein. Dr. Polidori also allegedly wrote a book of his own. I am not convinced that it wasn't Byron who did it, but he wrote a book called The Vampire that is not good reading. Don't try to revive it. Don't try to revive Polidori as a literary figure. And this is Paul West writing a novel, and it's right up my alley in a number of ways. It's historical fiction, first of all. Do I need to put this any closer? If I put it any closer, I block the beam. I don't want to block the beam. You're all here for her anyway. It's historical fiction. It's historical fiction about Lord Byron, who I know a lot about and really think is fascinating. And it's by Paul West, who is... he is another category that appeals to me about this book, which is a really, really good author who has somehow managed never to ignite with the public imagination. People just don't know this author that I've met. Most people just don't know this author. They don't have any idea of the breadth of what he's done or how good it is. He's never failed me. He's never let me down. So I was very happy to read this and really like it. Put it for years on the shelf with my other Byron books, fiction and nonfiction. But I don't have such a shelf anymore, even though I have many Byron books, and I don't have this book anymore. I think I had it as a crappy trade paperback. Maybe it just fell apart on me. That would be at least an honest reason not to have it. Then we have the old Mammoth Book series. This is very old, before they were revamped. This is one of the first ones, I think. The Mammoth Book of Great Detective Stories, which also fits for a BookTube event, March Mystery Madness, which is ongoing in the month of March, where we're reading murder mysteries at a pell-mell pace. If I had this thing, well... I'd be reading right through it, but I checked for a lot of these things, and I don't have them. And this was again, a cheesy, poorly made trade paperback. Maybe that's why I don't have it anymore. Maybe it actually fell apart. Not something I need to worry about with ebooks. Then we have Rory Clements. I recently, just last year, I think, talked about the Prince and the Spy, a thriller by Rory Clements, and a lot of you. I said, I think at the time that I'd never read the author before. A lot of you pointed out, yes, you have, and a lot of you pointed out, well, you should because he's really good. And I found, sure enough, in my library of scanned book covers that I had read the author before, just not a 20th century Le Carré spy thriller. Instead, I read this, an Elizabethan thriller called Martyr, set in the Elizabethan court in which a cousin of the Queen is found brutally, ritualistically murdered. I remember really liking this thing. No idea why I would have got rid of it. Looks like I got an advance copy from the publisher and just didn't hold on to it. No idea why. It's right up my alley. This one is not right up my alley. I got an advance copy of this as well. This is by Anne Blaney, and it's Marvelous Melba. This is Dame Nellie Melba. It is a name that was synonymous with fame 100 years ago, but you might not know her now. She's not known now. The most, I think, probably the widest known she is Melba Toast. but one way or another, this author does a great job of detailing that fame. Marvelous Melba is really not. I mean, it's a biography of Nellie Melba, but it's really also a biography of fame. Because her fame was overwhelming. You wouldn't believe it now, but it was. It was overwhelming. She was world famous. And this author tracks down all kinds of original records, all the shows that she did, and the whistle-stop trains that she did to bring what she considered high art to the masses. Fantastic story. I think with that one, the reason I don't think I ever got a finished copy. I think I sent the advance copy to a freelancer for the old Open Letters Monthly, and that I think that freelancer did what freelancers tend to do really well, which is disappear off the face of the earth. just go missing completely. This next one is by James Sheehan. This is a debut novel called The Mayor of Lexington Avenue, that had problems, as debut novels tend to do. It was over-conceptualized, which is a big problem with debut novels, and it was also occasionally overwritten. It was the story of two boys who are, their boyhood friends, but their lives take different paths. Very different paths. And the book does a very skillful job of making you wonder why that happens. Because these two started from the exact same space. And yet, one went on to fame and world power, and the other went to jail and seemed fixed to stay there. And the novel follows not just those physical, real-world fates, but psychological fates that happen, especially to the characters out in the real world. And I remember it being really good. I don't think anything was much said of it or done of it, and I don't know actually off the top of my head. I'm terrible with author names anyway, but I don't know if this author ever went on to write anything else. Probably he did. Probably he was a product of the 20th century, the horrible 20th century book culture, where he wouldn't have sold this to the publisher unless they asked for 2 other books, whether he had any ideas for them or not. But I remember liking this, at least to the extent that I usually do like debut novels. Then this next one, I believe, was a mass market paperback. Boy, I wish I still had this. This is by Kathleen Freeman, and it's called The Murder of Heroes. And it's Kathleen Freeman going through the trial transcripts that we have from ancient Athens, from 4th century Athens, and 5th century Athens, and looking at what we can reconstruct from those trials, what the Athenians considered crimes, how they conducted their legal proceedings. Fascinating stuff. I've read probably a dozen books like this about the legal system of ancient Rome. But hardly any about the legal system of ancient Athens. So I remember really liking this, really liking the job that the author did. Why I would have got rid of it. Again, the only reason I can think of is that maybe this was a mass market paperback and fell apart as I reconsulted it. That might be the case. Boy, the Batmobile exhaust pipe threw off my little iPad here. I guess if anything's going to do it, that will. You can just picture the loser owner of that thing just saying at the dealership, "Well, no, I want it to be louder." No, take the muffler off. I want it to be really, really loud. I want it to make a noise that rattles windows in their casing. And also, could you make flames come out when I hit the accelerator like the old Batmobile in the TV show? And you can picture the dealer saying, well, now that flames coming out of the back is illegal. And the person killing the car dealer and stealing the car, and so on down the line. I make up these melodramas because I seriously, deeply, personally, genuinely, immediately want the drivers of those cars dead. Wish that I could kill them with a thought. I wish that I could do it. Don't care at all if they have a boatload of grieving relatives behind. They know what they're doing, and they do it anyway. Anyway, you don't need an aria of hatred in the middle of the Library of the Lost. So we'll move on to a very strange book. A lot of you will know this author, know his work. This is Armistead Maupin, and he's famous for Tales of the City, but this is his book, The Night-Listener. And this is a very strange book, and the more you know about the story that gave birth to it, the stranger it gets. This is a story of a radio personality who falls gradually into a series of very long confessional late-night phone calls with a much younger person who has all sorts of personal problems and yet oddly insightful personal observations about the adults all around. And there gradually forms this kind of weird web of connection that starts to upend. It starts to feel like the earth is shaking under your feet when you start to wonder if the person, that mysterious younger person on the end of the phone, is real at all. And the more you know, you shouldn't have to know anything about Armistead Maupin's life to read this book and appreciate it. And I remember liking it, but I remember the whole time I was reading it, I read it before I knew that story actually happened to Armistead Maupin. And I read this before I knew that, before I knew any of the details of that story, which as far as I know has never been written up in a book. Aside from this, I suppose. But I remember when I was reading it before knowing that story thinking, okay, a lot of this doesn't really knit together well in the way that Armistead Maupin books tend to do. Why isn't this knitting together? What am I missing here? It was my natural first thought was, what am I missing? And I remember going back over the book. Was this an advanced copy? No. I remember going back over the book in a reviewer stance, saying, I wasn't commissioned to review the book, but I remember thinking, okay, you're missing something, though. There's something, you get that feeling. You get it as a reader anyway, and as a reviewer, it's especially heightened because you know that's going to be the detail that you need to know, or that you get wrong and are called on. And I was halfway through this thing, and I was thinking, okay, but something's not knitting together here. You're missing something. I kept going back when I don't think it's the fault of the book. I've thought about this since I read it, and I don't think it was the fault of me, is what I'm trying to say. I think the book doesn't knit together. I think this is a case where, a very dangerous case, when you do any kind of autofiction. When you draw your novel one-to-one, straight through, not just points or details or idiosyncrasies of the different characters, but the whole narrative plot line. If you pull that wholesale from life, you will have a really hard time seeing whether or not it stitches together well, which is what makes so much autofiction so bad and so boring. And this wasn't bad and it wasn't boring, but I would love to encounter this book again and give it another try, definitely. Then we have a book by Richard Ives called Of Tigers and Men. It's another galley copy that I got. And there's a leafy glade with a 500-pound super predator laying there waiting for you. This is a story, the title is very much a callback to Barry Lopez's book Of Wolves and Men. And this is a book about tigers. The author hunts for them all over the world, not with a gun, but to find them and to find the people who love them and who know about them and who hang out near them. Because the whole book is premised on the idea that by the time the author's children are his age, there won't be any tigers in the world. That premise is entirely true. Entirely true. There are so few wild tigers in the world right now that if you have a 4-room house, you could fit them all in your house. They might be cramped a little as they were wandering around, but there would be room. You wouldn't have to double stack them, is what I'm saying. There are hardly any wild tigers left in the world. And humanity, is encroaching on their habitat all the time. They need a vast habitat. So this author is entirely right. And there's a lot of poetic writing here about tigers. And also, surprisingly, sometimes about the people that love them and that are close to them in the wild in these various wildlife sanctuaries and forests and whatnot. I read this thing and really appreciated that part of the author's art Of course, I had a little bit of ambiguity personally because, unlike I would imagine most of the readers of this book, I have been in tiger country quite a bit. I've spent quite a bit of time there, and I've encountered tigers a couple of times, much closer than I wanted to. They largely don't want any trouble. Most apex predators don't want any trouble. Grizzly bears being a notable exception, but nevertheless, I was asking for trouble because I was not only in their territory, including way off the beaten path, way away from neat little roads like that, but also with a crowd of dogs, which that didn't do anything to endear me to these things. And they're gigantic. They're absolutely gigantic. I always say this about African lions, that you don't really have a sense of how big they are and how powerful they are until you're actually near one. And I don't mean a crazy animal in a zoo. I mean near one in the wild, where it's not just only a question of their size, although the one thing I always hear, or used to hear when I traveled from people, about lions, African elephants, and especially wolves, the one thing I always heard from tenderfeet newbies was, I never imagined they were that big. And it's not just a question of size, though. You feel the way their muscles move, and it's just otherworldly powerful. And tigers are that way. They are very much that way. And they swap out the kind of waiting malevolence of lions on the African savannah for still malevolence. They're still cats, after all. But there's much more of an intelligence there, I think. I don't know if any tests have been done. I'm not sure that there's any way to do it. But and also, I also noticed that my dogs gave a lot more regard to tigers than they did to lions. So I don't know if that means anything. But a fascinating book, a great work of popular natural history. Wish that I still have it. I obviously had the advanced copy. Did I get the finished copy? And if so, what happened to it? No idea. No idea at all. Then we have a UK trade paperback. I remember this was a UK trade paperback. That's why I got it. I love UK trade paperbacks. I just like the feel of them better than I do American trade paperbacks. And I had this in that format. Got rid of it. But this is by Kate Atkinson, who was famous at this time for case histories. What's the name of her character? Jackson Brody or Brody Jackson or something like that. This is One Good Turn. That's the UK cover. And these were police procedural thrillers, the kind of thing that for which she was famous before she did Life After Life, her big timey-wimey novel about a woman, about characters who just keep getting born over and over again, and reliving history and trying to change history. That book was interesting. It was a little bit overfreighted. A great amount of fun if you are in America. And you've always been curious to read Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. Well, the trade paperback has some very good blurbs on it, including a blurb from the Washington Post and a blurb from the Wall Street Journal right next to each other on facing pages. But I would read this again if I had it. I got rid of it somehow. I don't know why. And then the last one that we'll do here, is this the last one? Yes. The last one that we'll do is one of these reaction series. The Reaction Books does a little series of little paperbacks, monographs on various kinds of animals. There are over 100 of them by now, more than that maybe. Every once in a while they get written up, and every once in a while I find one. They're not distributed in the United States, as far as I know. And I found one by Desmond Morris, the author of The Naked Ape, and Dog Watching, and Cat Watching, and Horse Watching, called Owl. And I naturally grabbed it. No idea why I got rid of this. I remember the book. The main reason I can think of why I would get rid of something like this would be because it was completely derivative. If it was Desmond Morris just, sitting on the patio in the Antilles and writing something in an hour, then I wouldn't want it. I can do that myself. When it comes to the folklore and the natural history of owls, I can do that myself. I don't need to read somebody else doing it. But I distinctly remember that this was not like that. Of course, with a book like this, you're not going to, if you already study the species, you're not going to learn anything you don't already know. You're not going to see any anecdotes, any quotes from history that you don't already know. But they're still attractive little things. And given that, I can't imagine why I got rid of this, unless maybe I sent it to somebody. That's always a standing danger. But anyway, that's the Library of the Lost for today. Just a few titles. that I don't have anymore for one reason or another. Maybe some of them interested you. Certainly some of them I would take back if I found them at a used bookstore. But that will happen or it won't. We'll see. The Brattle will provide. But I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.